All
right, here we go.
Good evening, live from New York, where Mother Nature spins a wheel and decides if it's either 60 degrees, 30 degrees, if there's no wind, or if it's like Buffalo, where it's a 50-mile-per-hour wind. My name is Steve Rabinowitz.
My name is Jay Kaplan.
I'm Anthony Strait, and no matter the weather, the man is always back in town. Just remember that.
And that is Joe Tufaro, who decided to not actually introduce himself, but that's perfectly fine.
I'm the special guest. You're supposed to introduce.
You are a special guest
right.
here, and you will get your own
right.
introduction in a second. Welcome to On the Sports Lines. It's a late Monday, December edition. We're talking the college football Final Four and Major League Baseball in the only way we can talk about it in December, a lockout coming up in just a little bit. But let's talk some NFL, and whether we like it or not, we have to talk about the locals. Because, again, we are contractually obligated to, but we promise this is the last time. And we're going to do it with our good friend Joe Tufaro, writer, referee, a man who provides equal knowledge of everything sports. Good evening, Mr. Joseph.
How are you, fellas? What's going on?
Good to see you, Joe.
We are doing well, and we're going to start talking about the Jets. So Jets fans, start crying. The Jets are going into their final stretch, and they are a horse that's kind of limping to the finish. You know, me and Anthony, we pitched that we would rather talk about Minshew Mania and how the Eagles are going to be resurgent, but that was shot down. So, oh well. I guess we'll just talk about the 3-9 Jets and what they need to do in these final 5 games of the season. Fine. Joe will give his takes, and we will give the questions. Let's start with Jay.
All right. So obviously, Joe, since we last talked, the Jets have had 3 different quarterbacks run Mike LaFleur's offense with varying degrees of success while Zach Wilson recovered from a PCL strain. Wilson was below average in the Jets' win over the Texans, but his first half in the loss to the Eagles, running the offense effectively and leading the Jets to 3 touchdowns, was as good as we've seen him play all season. TD passes to Elijah Moore and Ryan Griffin, ran one in himself. Head coach Robert Saleh said it was the best Wilson looked this season, playing within the structure of the offense, and his footwork was amazing. Wilson even veered away from reliance on his fastball to hit receivers with a slew of changeups, if you will, a sign that he's maturing as a passer. Tevin Coleman showed us something in the run game, and Moore continues to improve and impress in the passing game. Jets have some winnable games down the stretch. Final 5 games, Joe, what should the offense be focusing on?
Well, I did watch the quick version this morning. I watched a little bit of it yesterday, but then I watched the condensed game this morning. And I did notice what you just said about Zach Wilson, that all of his throws yesterday, almost 100% of them were inside the numbers. Taking that thing away, again, because we know he has the arm strength. That's not a problem. But again, to make him more accurate, to work on his footwork, to go more timing, I think they tried to keep the throws in the middle of the field. Kind of hurt him in some cases where he couldn't look for certain things, and almost threw a few extra balls to the Eagles, because that's where that's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of traffic in there. But I think if you're just working on a guy's mechanics, which again is all they should be worried about, is developing him, is to make that 3-step, 5-step, 7-step drop, make the throw, and not have to be looking guys off, not having to be worried about a lot of different things and timing and all of those type of things. I think it was nice, as you had it here in preseason, about him throwing the windows and doing all stuff. All of that stuff is inside the numbers. You know, you're not doing that to guys on the outside. So I think it made a lot of sense from what I saw, if that's the plan, to continue to develop him, get some quick throws, get some timing with his receivers, start to learn some of these guys that might be around. Of course, if you could get that kick returner to play offense and do something, you might have something really going. But I think, I talked to Rabbi about this earlier, and it's like all of that stuff about, Flacco gives us the best chance to win, and this guy does this. Forget all that stuff. You just this is your guy. Stick with him, teach him, learn something. Who cares if you win another? I think that's what they need to do, is just keep developing him to make him as strong as possible going forward.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you brought up Flacco, and Wilson has said that having him in that quarterback room it may be the same messages coming from Mike LaFleur, but Joe, you and I both know that when that message comes from a peer who has all that wealth of experience and knowledge, sometimes that's how the message actually gets through. And, hopefully there's a lot to be said for being able to tell when you're a rookie.
Yeah, oh, wait, hold on a second. I'm going to mention one thing, though.
Right.
I want to mention this one quick thing, though. Every win by Seattle is also a loss for the Jets because they have to worry about that draft position, because that's a gift from heaven right there. If you can get 2 top 10 talents in this draft, that has pretty much kind of more of an overall feeling. All right, Anthony, let's talk about defense.
All right, Joe. Speaking of, and it's almost the same question, but for the defensive side, the Jets defense has been a mess. This will beat around the bush. They're dead last in yards. They're dead last in points given up. And they went through a stretch through October, November when they gave up 175 points. And Robert Saleh, known for his defensive, being a defensive mastermind in San Francisco, took a lot of criticism. And now they went through a couple of games against Miami and against Houston, respectively, where they seemed like they were turning in the right direction. But then Gardner Minshew happened, and the Eagles scored 7 on their first 8 possessions. And they got drilled again yesterday afternoon by the Philadelphia Eagles. It just seems like this unit, when they do take a step forward, they take about 4 steps back, and they just don't have the answer. And I have to ask you, I mean, going into this last month of the season, this final 4 or 5 games, what exactly should the defense be working on? Because maybe it's just me, but I feel like they don't have an identity right now. They don't stop the run very well. They can't play the pass all that well. They don't have much of a pass rush. I just don't see a defensive unit who has figured out what exactly they're good at right now. So, and I ask you, Joe, and you got a great football mind. What should defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich and the Jets focus on the last month of the season?
Well, this is my place for the joke. They should work on packing their bags and seeing where they're going to be living next year, because they're awful. I watched it yesterday, and again, they couldn't stop the run. There were even times when guys fell down. It would have been even worse on the Eagles if they had just kept going. I think Minshew had 12 passes in a row at one point that he completed with 2 touchdowns. 15 or whatever. 15 to start the game. I guess I stopped counting at 12. But again, there's really nothing there. Really, me, Anthony, I hate when we go through this. Oh, they look good against so-and-so. Well, Miami's terrible in offense. So they look good against a bad offensive team, that doesn't mean you're any good. That means the other guy's not any good. And then to say that, this guy is a defensive genius, the head coach. Well, yeah, but he had players. San Francisco's defense is still good, except for the second half yesterday against Seattle. But, it's still players. It's still not coaching. It's still not, you have to have some sort of system that he's going to put in. So I think what he needs to do is, for the next 5 weeks, is just continue to evaluate players and say, who's going to be here? Who can I put in a different spot? Look what they did in Washington. They made him a linebacker, because they're smart enough to say he can't cover anybody except maybe out in the flat or something. So instead of leaving him back at safety, where he gets beat all the time, as he did as a Giant in early couple of years in Washington, put him in a place where he's better off. So maybe we look at some of the younger kids on the Jets and see if there's some position changes you got to do, see if they're a little bit more, find out who's versatile enough, like the Giants do, to play a couple of different positions, to move guys around. I think the old system was to rely too much on CJ Mosley and too much on scheme and let's do this and you got to find some players and you got to find some solid guys. And, you're going to get 2 first-round draft picks in a draft that's a defense. So you don't have to worry about finding quarterbacks and running backs and wide receivers anymore. So go out and find some defensive linemen, which they've always had. But their defensive linemen even have been different types. Go out and find some linebackers, get some guys who can play in the back, identify some free agents, maybe guys that want to come in as leaders, because all your leaders are guys that have wanted to leave, right? You had Adams and you got the safety this year. Always Maine. To get out of there. So clean house, get rid of the defense, start from scratch, get your guys there that you know are going to work in your system since you're the defensive genius, and figure out how you're going to rebuild that, because that's going to be the part of the team that the offense. You know, they're kind of the flip side of the Giants at this point. You know, they have a quarterback now. They have some wide receivers. Elijah Moore looks good. A couple of these other guys look good. Coleman looks okay. You know, you get some offensive linemen. That's going to be solid, and you're going to just develop this quarterback now and bring in a couple of guys. But your defense can't be giving up 35 points a game to an Eagles team that scored nothing against the Giants. And again, it was a different team because you now went from a run-happy offense to a passing offense in 1 week because you changed quarterbacks. So I'm not saying he couldn't prepare for it, because they're certainly good enough coaches, but that is that they just showed up and looked. He couldn't stop anything. I mean, I know Miles Sanders just came back and he's playing, you know, he's obviously healthy and he looked pretty good in the second half, but you knew they were running the ball and you couldn't stop anything, and guys were wide open. So obviously their schemes and the guys that they have playing them just aren't good enough. So I think you have to spend the next 5 weeks figuring out who you want to keep here and if they can be put in different positions. And again, you're not trying to win games. So take the number 2 and 3 spot in the draft. Take the number 3 and 4, 4 and 5, whatever it turns out to be. Take those 2 guys in the top 5 and figure out who that's going to be. Don't worry about winning games. Just figure out who your leaders are and who you need to replace on this team.
Hey, Rabbi, I don't know about you, but I would keep the Williams brothers on defense. They seem to have done pretty well. Not many other guys said about, but both of them have done pretty well.
It's kind of funny the way that you just said it, because of the fact that they're just so poor in so many areas on defense, and their offense has actually shown signs of playing with 3 different quarterbacks until they didn't get prepared, which is how it ends up being. By the way, Jets would right now be the 4th and 5th pick in the draft. Giants would be 6th and 7th. So this is going to be a fun April when we get to it. All right, Joe.
Yeah,
the coaching
but I'm saying
situation.
If you lose the next 5 games, you might be 2 and 3.
Well, it depends. I don't need a battle of the sucking right now, and I know they still have to play the Jaguars. That's going to be the league's most favorite game when we get to that game. I think it's on December 2nd, or no, it's on December 26th. So everybody's going to be the conspiracy game. Remember the game last year when they went against the Rams, where everybody was just like crying, like, "No, we've lost Trevor Lawrence." Okay, coaching. It's mostly new guys. Jeff Ulrich on the defense. You got LaFleur, who showed signs of life on the offense. As we mentioned, rookie pairings never really work out. And Saleh has been mediocre in his first year of coaching. What do you expect for the coaching coming down the stretch? Because no one's getting fired at the end of this year. I think that's a guarantee.
Well, I mean, I don't know what you mean by the head coach has been mediocre. I mean, what do you expect him to do? You expect him to go out and win games by himself?
I don't expect him to go out and win games. I'm expecting him to be like, do you know how to handle the media? Do you know how to be the face of the franchise? Can you make an impression? And honestly, the answer to those 3 questions for me is not really. The man needs to learn coach speak, and he hasn't really done that yet.
I like the guy I like his demeanor on the sideline. I like he's not a yeller and a screamer. He's the opposite of some of these guys, Rex Ryans and those guys that
not his players.
Everybody
was yelling at the refs on Sunday.
Yeah. No, he's very calm. He walks over and points and he talks and he has a good conversation. And I do like that part. I think he's rah-rah when he needs to be with his team when they're doing well. But I don't think, and he's not all over them when something goes bad. I think he tries to keep them calm and keep them going forward and learning and doing different things. So again, it's everybody's first year. So it's still a honeymoon. He'll figure it out. I don't think anybody's giving him a hard time in the room as far as the media goes, because nobody's expecting anything. You're not sitting there going, how come we didn't win 8 or 9 games already? So I think that his only mistake, as you talk about coach speak, I think the only mistake he's made this year was when he said Flacco gives us a better chance. That's why he's playing. That's not your point. Your point, let him go play. It's not because he gives you the better chance to win. That's not what you're trying to achieve here. And I think he's still trying to keep the fans happy while doing what he has to do, which is not easy in Jetland.
No.
But so I think he's rah-rah at the right times. I think he understands what he has and what he has to do here. And he should get a nice long leash on anything. He doesn't seem like he's going to make any, as you and I talked about this morning, I don't even make too many in-game mistakes because I don't think he really can. They're not in that many positions where you can do stupid things. So I don't think he's going to get graded on there too long. So I think they're fine. I think you just have to keep teaching, keep coaching, and keep that list of who's working for you hard, who's not, who we want here, who's a leader, who's not, and just keep working on that.
Yeah, and the Jets are not
possibly do. The man does need to find a kicker.
Well, he found another
right,
one today. He's found plenty of kickers, Jay.
Hey, listen.
I'll rephrase that. Kickers find a good kicker.
But maybe that deflects. Maybe that deflects from everything else that's going on. Like, nobody cares the defense is 28, 30, and 32 because, hey, we got a new kicker today, so it gives them something else to talk about, you know.
Six consecutive drives given up is probably more noticeable than missing your 2 extra points. But when you miss your 2 extra points, that's a lot more to really worry about. All right, let's move on to the Giants, who I think we'll have a little more discussion about. The Giants are 4-8. So comparing the Jets and the Giants is like comparing the Titanic to the Titanic 2. And now with an injured Daniel Jones and Jake freaking Fromm possibly starting this week for the Giants, don't get me started on that deciding that QB of the future / picking up 5th-year option thing is kind of on hold. Jay, start us
on. Rabbi, the comparison is the Titanic versus the Hindenburg, if you will.
I know it's the Hindenburg. I wanted to make a joke. You don't have to fix anything.
With a Lusitania.
There you go. Joe, since we last talked, Joe Judge has fired Jason Garrett as his offensive coordinator, replaced him with Freddie Kitchens. 2 games later, the offense doesn't seem to have changed much, and it hasn't seemed to matter whether it's been Daniel Jones or Mike Glennon under center. And the possibility, as Rabbi said, looms that it could be Jake Fromm on Sunday. The offense still can't seem to put points on the board. Jones led them to 13 points and 264 total yards in the win over the Eagles. Glennon led them to 9 points and 250 total yards in the loss to the Dolphins, though Jones did play better than Glennon. Kitchens' attempts at creative scheming and play calling produced similar results as to what we saw with Garrett's offense. The offensive line continues to struggle. They had no answers for the Dolphins' pass rush on Sunday. Injuries, something, continue to keep the Giants playmakers off the field. I broke that down on the last show. And when they have managed to get on the field, they really haven't made plays in the past 5 games. And this stat blew my mind. The Giants don't have a touchdown by either a running back or a wide receiver. Jones's neck injury kept him out of the Dolphins' loss. And while he's been able to move and throw, he still hasn't been cleared for contact as of yet. The hope is that he'll be cleared to play this Sunday against the Chargers, but that seems to be more of a pipe dream at this point. With all this as backdrop, what should the offense be focusing on over these last 5 games? And does that focus change if Jones can't play with any regularity?
Yeah, it does, Jay, because you can't compare if they're making any strides when you don't have the same guys playing. And it's especially when it's the quarterback. Even though, so they beat the Eagles. They did what they had to do. Yeah, that wasn't great. It didn't look fantastic, but you won the game. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a pass there. And it was the first week. It was a 4-day week where they had changed coordinators. So nothing was going to change from there. Freddie Kitchens was put in a bad spot. And it's a good thing him and Judge are friends because that's a bad spot to put a guy in, is firing somebody, putting you in charge of this offense, having you stand in front of the media. And I think that's why he didn't even name that he was the play caller on that Thursday, because he didn't want to put him in front of the media to say what's going to be different, what are you going to change, when there was obviously not going to be much to be changed. I did see the same thing that Judge said last night. I mean, I did see some differences they did convert on some long third downs yesterday. They had Galladay on a couple of third and 10s where he got about 18 yards. They did hit Evan Ingram a few times down the seam. So now if the point now is, and Barkley dropped 3 balls yesterday, which was inexcusable. But the point now is, was that a Glennon mistake? Glennon missed Evan Ingram on a throw. He missed Ross on a throw. He missed a couple other guys. He threw some bad balls to Barkley and hit him in the helmet. So you can't really say, okay, so from week to week, they didn't get any better, because you have to imagine if Jones was in there, maybe he hits one of those guys, and he's not that bad at that point. He also is more mobile than Glennon is. He's going to get some more runs. And the whole offense does change. It's like taking Lamar Jackson out of the game and saying we have to play a completely different offense. So it's very difficult to figure out what this offense has to do when you don't know if he's going to be in there. If he comes back and he plays well, I think if you start to see that more, where they're not scared on 3rd and 8, that they're trying to getting 7 yards like they have for the last 2 years, that he's throwing the ball down the field, he's getting time. They gave the line being poor. They gave up no sacks against the Eagles, 0 to the Eagles. So, that's a big, big movement there at that point. And again, that's part of the offensive line working with the quarterback, working with the running backs, working with the recognize those pressures and where they're coming from, and to set up the blocking. So I think throw in there as a measuring stick, because he didn't play. And yeah, you did see some changes, and you did see some better offense, and you saw some better plays called. I think they should stop running screen passes, because the offensive line is barely good enough in space, in their own space, to make them run out there and chase a bunch of little guys around. Doesn't do them any good. And also, this is very important. We talked about this. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago with some of the guys in my officiating group. Now that you can't cut guys anymore, those little guys, they can run around. The lineman used to go out there and go at those guys' legs and take them out of the play, and you can't do that anymore. So you're standing there at 350 pounds, and these two little guys at 175 pounds are running around. They'll go right around you to make the tackle, or you don't have to go through you anymore. And so I think that part of the game's changed, and they don't pull enough on their runs to make it look the same, to make some of to confuse the defense enough. So I think they need to stop running those plays. And again, you've got Barkley, who's now coming back again. You see him get his legs under him a little bit. You see him start to he made that one move to get the first down where he jumped over a couple of guys. Mm-hmm. He did that spin move.
Yep.
So, he's starting to feel better, right? Mm-hmm. You say, oh, I can do this without getting carried off the field. He had the 130-yard run. And again, he gets tackled. He gets up. He's limping a little bit. He's still in that spot where he's not sure of himself. But that's a 3-week process usually. So now you see what he can do maybe against the Chargers, and then the next week, wherever they go after that. So I think there is progress being made, and I think it's going to be a slow thing. I think the biggest thing, and we'll talk about this in the coaching session, is Kitchen's going to be the guy. Is this the philosophy? Is this the system that you're going to run, or is it going to change? You're going to bring in another guy. What are you going to do? But I don't mind. Yesterday didn't bother production, because it was based more around the quarterback than it was around the other players and the other skill position players.
Yeah, I don't mind. Rabbi, you and I talked about this. I mean, Mike Glennon is who Mike Glennon is, and you know exactly what you're getting with him, the good and the bad. And there's a reason he is a backup and not, not a starter in this league. And you talk about something, you talked about the offensive line. You made a good point, Joe, and something that just, that dawned on me that maybe most fans don't understand or may not recognize. The protections that get called will change slightly based on the type of quarterback who is dropping back. Glennon is a statuesque, stand in the pocket, drop back. He's not mobile. He doesn't even really move around too much inside of the pocket. He stands back there. He can take a hit. He's 6'7". He's got a good arm. But the difference between the way he plays quarterback and the way Jones plays quarterback, who is more mobile, who will move around inside the pocket or even outside the pocket, it does change the type of protections you call on any given pass play. So the line, as you said, Joe, if the line is used to playing a certain way and calling certain protections with Jones under center, and they have to kind of like do something entirely different to accommodate the way Glennon plays quarterback, you may see what looks like a step backwards, but as you said, it's only within the context of the guy. There's a change in the guy who's, taking the snaps.
It is a change.
As Carl Banks,
hold on.
Yes, yesterday, Mike Glennon was good till he wasn't anymore. And
exactly.
He started off very good. He started off 8 for 9 or 9 for 10, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn.
Yep.
So.
Rabbi?
And unfortunately, the one thing that we have to notice is, and I know you mentioned it, Jay, but you're not going to play with the same quarterback for 17 weeks anymore. That's the likelihood now. Quarterbacks get injured and get injured on more of a basis. And as we've said before, there are not 32 good quarterbacks in the league, but you do see some teams working with their scheme. Arizona is probably the best example of it this year, working with a guy who backed up with the Giants last year, winning road games in spots where Kyler Murray may not have even won a road game. So Giants still have a lot. I understand what you're saying, but I do think the Giants do bear a lot of responsibility of what happened yesterday because they just didn't look ready to play. And I know they had to have known Glennon was going to be the starter till at least Tuesday or Wednesday. They may not have said it to the media until Friday, but I think they knew Glennon and what he could do, and I don't think they adjusted to it. And obviously, Glennon is still a backup quarterback. Anthony, let's go ahead with defense.
Well, Joe, we talked about this over the course of the season with this defense, and it feels like deja vu because the second half of the season starts, Patrick Graham and the defense starts to improve and gel over time. They're playing their best stretch of the most explosive offense in the world. It's Dink and Dunk with 2, and they've been so good at during the stretch was create turnovers and create opportunities for the offense. And yesterday, with the offense struggling, I really felt like that was something that the Giants defense desperately had to do, was to kind of force the issue and try to create an opportunity for a turnover. They weren't able to do that. They couldn't keep Miami out of the end zone. And a few times they were able to get to the red zone. So it was more like a loss, but the defense played well enough to win, but they just didn't do enough as far as being able to help out a struggling offense. But over this course of the stretch of the season, obviously, and compared to last year, obviously the defense is playing very well. In your opinion, what do they have to continue doing during these last final 5 games that they can maybe take into the offseason, kind of reassess and see what they got going moving forward?
Anthony, and they have to continue to obviously play as a unit, but they have to continue to make the little changes that they've made. Adoree Jackson was out for 2 weeks now, and so they put Robinson in there, and he's played great. Another good draft pick from UCF who got stuck in there, and he's playing very, very well. So you that have to step up and play, and now you find out you got a little bit more depth than you thought. Maybe in case somebody leaves or somebody gets hurt, he can step up, and you have a nice young piece there that can play. You've moved Julian Love down, taken him out of free safety, put him in strong safety, put him at linebacker, put him at different places that he can complement Logan Ryan. So I think they continue to do that and build their depth and figure out, again, what do you have here, who you're going to be able to keep and hold on to, and where do you need to complement that? Again, you've lost a lot of guys on defense throughout the year, starting with Blake Martinez and all of those things. So are you going to need to replace him? Again, we don't really know the status on a lot of these guys, but you've got Tay Crowder, who's, again, another good draft pick who's stepped in and played very well the last few weeks. You got Reggie Ragland, who's played very well. You've got a lot of guys who have stepped up. They really have done what Joe Judge has said, is everyone's ready to play. Everybody on this roster can walk in there and play if they have to, and if you're dressed, you're going to play. So I think they just continue to do. I thought they played very well yesterday. I was disappointed at the end of the first half. That was the only drive they really gave up all day. And then at that point where the offense just kind of imploded, you could see the wind kind of went out of their sails, and they didn't really finish very well yesterday. But they held it together for a long time, and that the offense should have been able to do a little bit more. I know Rabbi listens to the radio too, and Bob Papa kept saying, "So is this the spot for the turnover? Is this where we get the big play? Because it's going to have to happen." And McKinney dropped one that would have been a great catch. A couple of these guys did get their hands on some balls, did get some pop-ups, did get some overthrows from Tua, but not as bad as he's been. And he didn't make his big mistake where he just throws it to somebody. Even that first pass that Glennon threw for the interception, there's a guy open short, but, that he could have gone to. Wasn't the worst play in the world, but is underthrown. And again, that's something Jones isn't going to do. So that defense needs some help, obviously, but they gave up nothing. If that was a regular game, you'd go, man, they gave up nothing. They did. Fantastic for 3 quarters. I just think they need to continue to work their system, continue to add more and more. And, they do take after the Belichick system in a way that they are different every week. And it's nice to see they can go high pass rush, they can go high cover, they can go 3 and 8, they can play 4 and 4, they can play a lot of different fronts, confuse a lot of guys. Think of what this defense has done to Patrick Mahomes. Think of what this defense has done to a lot of teams this year and quarterbacks this year, where they've really made them look bad. I mean, forget Sam Darnold and whoever, the guy in Simeon and those guys down in New Orleans. Some of these guys look absolutely awful, and that's what they need to do. Hopefully they can stick together and not have this become an offense versus defense thing. This team needs to keep together, and that's part of my coaching talking points also.
Yeah, and the one thing, they basically have ruined Jalen Hurts' career, because they picked apart Jalen Hurts last week in that game against Philadelphia and made him look like he was only running the ball and he had no passing ability, which in most cases he doesn't. But let's talk about the coaching situation. We've talked about it before today. I think Judge has to stay only because you need to have a little bit of stability in the head coaching job, and people who are calling for his head are basically, who are you replacing him with is really the most important question, and no one has an answer to that. However, Gettleman has been rumored to be on the outs. I would not be surprised if he left. Obviously, Freddie Kitchens, we've seen a couple of games from him now. Remember week 15 last year. Remember week 15 last year. He was there for Garrett, and he did not look good in that Sunday Night Football game against Cleveland. He has more time, obviously, but we do have a little bit of a sample size. And obviously, Patrick Graham is doing exactly what he did last year. So what do you think about the coaching situation coming towards the end?
Yeah, I always remember, wrote him a letter today. I always remember John Maris saying when they hired Judge, obviously we're going to be a little bit more patient with Joe because where he comes from and what he's built up as. And he's starting from scratch, basically with, making a culture change and teaching everybody how we play and how you're supposed to play football and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't think there's that much pressure there. The fans always on Monday mornings, oh, I'm tired of all this. Well, who cares? Even this fake controversy about why did they call a timeout in the first quarter because the clock was running down. By the way, the clock on the TV is not the clock in the stadium. No. That's the TV clock. So the side judge was nice enough to walk up to him and say, hey, you're going to have to run a play here. And he said play clock, and he said, I'll just take the timeout because I'm not going to force a bad play. So to me, that's a good coaching decision. That's not a poor coaching decision. That made a lot of sense at that point to call that timeout and not force something into there just because the clock was running down. As far as Gettleman goes, I think he will retire. I think he will step aside. I think they'll bring Kevin Abrams up. I don't think they're going to go outside. Only because, again, what I tried to say while I was doing my other stuff is you got to go back through the last 3 years. And Jay, we always talk about this on draft night. Don't worry about what the kid did last year. And don't worry what he does this year. It's 3 years, right? You go back to the guys they've had in the last 3 years. There's some great players in that group. And even the guys this year, Ojulari has been fantastic. And and he's just going to grow and get better. Tony, and you and I, I told you guys on draft night, what happens to rookie players? They get hurt. So maybe he'll play 8 games this year. I'm probably going to be right just where the number of games he's going to play. Kadarius Toney is a superstar. Guys see him and they know what he's capable of doing. The free agents that you brought in, they're starting to get into the system, the whole thing. I think the biggest thing here is Joe Judge and whoever it is, if it's Abrams or Gettleman or somebody new, have to figure out what the offensive philosophy is of this team. And, defensives don't play well for 17 weeks. Kansas City, they're ready to get rid of Spagnuolo by week 6. I know I have a good friend of mine said, I guess we're going nowhere this year. Our defense is awful. They'll never win a game. But all of a sudden, they're back
they've
to
been
being
world beaters the last 4 weeks on defense.
They've been fantastic. And again, it's who you play. It's when you play. It's
right, for God's sake.
And it's a long time. It's 4 months. You're never going to play good for four and a half months. So, but you do want to get better as the season goes. And that's what this defense does. And they shut guys down. Like you said, they manhandled Philadelphia. You think about it, they played really well and the offense played really well against Washington and they beat Philadelphia. So those are the teams you're looking at and you want to see how they perform in those situations. And they good teams outside the division. But I think you have to figure out, I'm not going to say we had any look at what Freddie Kitchens can do because he's using the same playbook that they have.
I understand that completely.
Yeah, can he walk in, take an off season? Is he the guy you want to take an off season and say, okay, this is what we need to build out of this playbook? What I see is there's a lack of speed plays. I don't see any quick throws from any of these quarterbacks. The turnaround and play action pass takes so long to accomplish before you then look to the outside guy that it's no longer a quick throw. I was watching a couple of guys tonight when they do play action passes and check and look at the guy, they just do it quick, 2 hands, let the running back go by, but they never stop looking forward. All of our guys turn around while they're doing the fake handoff and it just slows the play down to that point and throws some time off. So we never get that 3rd and 2 quick throw to, that Rodgers does to Devontae Adams, where he takes 1 step forward and he's there and you can't stop it. So is there someone who can develop that kind of speed game that can change some of those mechanics? It's not going to happen in the next 5 weeks.
No.
Kitchens is only going to be able to do with what he has. Hopefully they get, people talking about picking up the 5th-year option on Daniel Jones, which I would do. But, you're also talking about Shepard's game this year. You gave him a big contract and he can't get on the field. Kadarius Toney's been out. Galladay seems to get hurt every game. You got to get some of these guys to get through, get a little bit tougher, find different ways to get them open a little bit more instead of everybody cutting across and getting hit every time they catch a ball. And I just think it's a philosophy that has to change on offense. It has to get quicker. It has to get more open. And who's going to do that? I don't know Freddie Kitchens that well. I only know him as a head coach and as a tight ends coach. So I don't know what
as Baker Mayfield's best friend, essentially.
Yeah, I don't know what his scheme is. Yeah, he was good as the offensive coordinator, obviously in Cleveland. The stupid thing was making him a head coach, and that's
100%.
And every year with taking position guys and making them head coaches. Nothing says you're going to be a good head coach because you were a good coordinator.
Oh yeah.
All of these guys that have moved up, we could name 50 guys.
Shermer. Shall we continue, Joe?
I think we should. It's fine.
No, we could. You could name 50 guys that should never have been head coaches, and then they go back and they're just as good, like Spagnuolo, at being what they are, which is a defensive coordinator. They're just not.
Look at Todd Bowles. Look at Todd Bowles for the greatest example.
Wade Phillips.
Yeah.
Okay. We move on.
Again, we can name 50 guys, right?
We could, but then we'd be here. All right, so we're all in on this next segment as we're going to go away from the locals to, well, everybody else. And we're going to go way, way back to a long time ago. And we are going to look at teams that we decided in the preseason to watch. And all of them are still in it because everybody in the NFL is still in it. By the way,
you get a wild card. You get a wild card. Everybody gets a wild card berth.
By the way, doesn't this NFL season feel like it started 24 months ago? There's one extra week, and I feel like it's not a year. We're going to take a look back at our picks, starting with Anthony Ed. Schizophrenic SoFi Stadium team number 1.
Yeah.
Number 2, but.
Well, number 2 in the hearts, but the first one that we're talking about.
Well, way back in the preseason, I felt like the Chargers would probably be one of those teams that could push the Chiefs in the AFC West, and I thought because the defense would be a lot better. Well, that has been the case. They went from 23rd in the league total to 29th. They had a hard time stopping the run all season long, and a question I even talked to Jay and even Rabbi about. When obviously pre-production meeting is, could the defense help out his offense? I mean, we know what we get with Justin Herbert, we know what we get with Keenan Allen and all these weapons, but can the defense actually play up to the potential it was supposed to have been at the beginning of the season? When you go to Cincinnati and then they finally have a very complete performance. 6 sacks, the first time they've had 6 sacks a game in over a decade, forcing 4 turnovers, including a fumble recovery for a touchdown. And then you look at the Chargers' last 5 games of the season, 3 of those are in the division, and they have the Kansas City Chiefs in 2 weeks coming into SoFi Stadium with a win at hand. So when you look at the Chargers, everything actually is laid out in front of them. You know, they beat the Chiefs in 2 weeks. They win the head-to-head tiebreaker, and it pretty much gives them an inside edge on the division title. They have a giant team that is just broken on offense and battered and bruised coming into town this week. And they also have 2 more games left within the division, which could pretty much help them pretty much run away with the AFC West. But again, it comes down to the defense. Can this defense have the defense turn the corner, and can they carry this momentum that they were able to pick up in Cincinnati 24 hours ago the rest of the season? They've been very uneven. They played good in stretches, and then there's been times where we saw when Cleveland played them, they pretty much took the rest of the day off. Like there was no way they could stop anybody. And then we saw what happened against Denver, and there's been weeks where they look manageable, like a team that they just need to survive and just bend, don't break. And other times they just look downright hard. And it's a surprise because you thought the defense would be able to pick it up a little bit, but they're right there. I mean, despite all the defensive struggles, despite Justin Herbert's uneven play, the last month, they're 1 game out. They have a win already in hand in Kansas City. They get a second crack at them in 2 weeks, and everything is right in front of them. If they can put this defense together and just start to be able to force more takeaways, they can. Who knows? They can definitely win this. The division's right there. They can definitely win it. But more importantly, they do a better job of solidifying themselves at least in a wild card chase. Because right now they're the second wild card team, so they can prevent themselves from falling out of the playoff picture, but they can definitely move up big time.
Still the number 1 QBR, by the way, in the NFL is Justin Herbert. So everybody's been schizophrenic all year. By the way, don't be surprised if the Giants win on Sunday. I'm just letting you know right now. Do not be surprised if the Giants win on Sunday, just because I have no physical answer for it. I know Keenan Allen just went on the COVID list. I feel like more's coming for the Chargers. I would not be surprised if the Giants actually pull out of them there on Sunday. Take whatever spread it is. I think it's Jay. I know the Rams are technically team 1 in LA, but they are the second team that we're talking about. So talk about LA.
Yes, I am. The team I picked way back in the preseason as a team to watch. And they were my preseason pick to rep the NFC in the Super Bowl is the Los Angeles Rams, currently 8-4 and holders of the NFC's #1 wildcard slot. The big question for me down the stretch was, could they get back to that early season success? They blazed out of the gate, sandwiching a 3-game winning streak and a 4-game winning streak around the loss to the Cardinals, who've become the class of the NFC West. Matthew Stafford was carving up defenses, showing everyone just what Sean McVay's offense could do with a top-flight quarterback at the helm, to the tune of almost 69% completion percentage, almost 310 passing yards per game, 22 touchdowns against only 4 picks, over 9 yards per attempt, and a passer rating of 118. Cooper Kupp was basically uncoverable. 63 catches, 924 yards. That's 115.5 per game. 10 touchdowns. Overall, the team was putting up 30.6 points per game, allowing 21 points per game. Leonard Floyd had 6.5 sacks in the first 8 games. Aaron Donald had 5, and Jalen Ramsey was disruptive as hell from his star position. They were making me look really good for picking them as my NFC rep in the Super Bowl. They brought in Von Miller to add some more oomph to the pass rush, and Odell Beckham Jr. to provide another playmaker on offense. As I said on the show, I liked the addition of Miller. I felt that being in an ancillary role to Donald and Floyd would make him more productive, since he was unlikely to see the type of double teaming he saw in Denver. I was and still am skeptical of the addition of Beckham. He's been a divisive figure wherever he's been, and his production has not lived up to the hype. So far, he hasn't made a stink about being a secondary playmaker behind Kupp, wide receiver Van Jefferson, and tight end Tyler Higbee. His acquisition did turn out to be fortuitous with the loss of Robert Woods for the season to an ACL injury. Then the Rams hit this 3-game losing streak where they looked more like the team that struggled with Jared Goff at quarterback last season. They were soundly beaten by the Titans 28-16 and the 49ers 31-10, and then they lost to the Packers 36-28. They didn't look anything like that 7-1 team. Well, I mean, was it about meshing the new guys? Miller seemed to struggle to fit into his new role. And it seemed that McVay and Stafford were forcing things to Beckham a little bit, something that reduced the effectiveness of the Giants and Browns offenses in Beckham's previous stops. Stafford and the offense seemed to right the ship against Green Bay despite losing. And the team that whacked Jacksonville 37-7 on Sunday looked very much like the team that we saw in that 7-1 start. Are the Rams all the way back? I mean, Jacksonville can make any team look like world beaters. But that being said, Stafford was his usual self, 26 of 38, 295 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, 7.8 yards per attempt, sacked only once, passer rating of 117.8. He's had a passer rating above 100 in every one of the Rams' wins this season. Sony Michel stepped up in the running game with Darrell Henderson injured. 125 yards on 24 carries and a touchdown. Kupp, 8 catches for 129 yards and a score. Jefferson and Beckham also caught TD passes from Stafford. McVay got back to his play-action roots, utilizing it from both the shotgun and under center, incorporating that play action with the straight plus a solid run game, made for the diverse offense we got used to seeing from the Rams at the start of the season. Add that to Donald Floyd, Ramsey in the defense causing havoc, holding the Jags to under 200 yards total offense, and it was the most complete game they've played in a month. The remaining schedule isn't easy. At Arizona, home for Seattle. At Minnesota, at Baltimore, home for San Francisco. But 3-2 is possible, and that should be enough to get them into the playoffs, which is all you really want at this point. So the Rams actually, they have me comfortable again with them being my NFC Super Bowl pick.
That Arizona game is such a huge game, I think, for their psyche next Monday, because I don't think the Rams I think the Rams might be out of that divisional phase because they probably will not have a tiebreaker, but psyche-wise, they need that. Psyche-wise, they need that game, because if they end up ever playing Arizona in a third game, because if they play Dallas, they're going to beat them. I'm telling you right now, Dallas is nothing special.
I'm 100% on board with that call, Rabbi.
But they need to be ready for a third matchup with them, and they're going to make the playoffs, Jay. 6-7 right now occupies the Washington football team isn't even the last team in the playoff spot right now. The freaking Taylor Heineke-led Washington football team. I believe Joe is next. No, I'm next. I'm sorry.
Joe
is next. I am next.
However you want to do it, Rabbi.
I am next, and I'm going to talk very quickly about the Colts because I want to see how this Patriots-Bills game continues to feel itself out. Jonathan, this team is 7-6 actually, and they have the rare Week 14 bye. You would think after Thanksgiving all byes should be done, but there are still 4 teams who are on bye this week. And they look good. They look good in a couple of ways. Number one is obviously Jonathan Taylor. And ever since Derrick Henry went down, he must have taken over the body of Derrick Henry and just become a beast. 1,348 rushing yards, 16 rushing touchdowns. I believe he has a nine-game touchdown streak, 18 total TDs, and he is the most fed back in the league. He's going to have 362 touches if he stays at the same pace, which is pretty much what he did in Wisconsin in those last 3 seasons. He had 346 in 2019. This team is good. They're going to be in the mix for that final wild card spot. The Titans did sweep them already. So winning the division, not out of the question. I don't think it's a likely goal. But also look at what Carson Wentz has been doing. He hasn't been losing games for them. He's also going to give the Eagles another first-round pick since he's already played 75% of the snaps this year. But even look against the Texans, 16-22 passing, 158 yards and 1 touchdown. And then the week before, basically going mano-a-mano for most of the game with Tom Brady. And I do have to say, Carson Wentz and Frank Reich are a good fit with each other. The Colts really struggled to begin the year. That loss that they had against Baltimore was almost devastating for them. And if they miss the playoffs, they'll look at that, and that'll be the biggest mistake that they made this whole entire year, letting that lead slip by their fingers. But if you look at the Colts' remaining schedule, it helps that they play in the NFC South. They have New England coming up next after the bye. That's going to be a very important game. That is a Saturday night game. They have Arizona on Christmas. They have Las Vegas and they have Jacksonville. If they can split those 2 games against New England and Arizona, and that ain't easy to do, I have a feeling they can win those last 2 games and possibly end up at 9-8, maybe even 10-7. And I think 10-7 should be enough to get them into the playoffs. Joseph,
yes.
New England or Buffalo? You tell me, which AFC East team do you want to look at? Because this game going on is insane right now. Mac Jones has still thrown 1 pass in the entire game, and kind of makes me question what they're doing.
Yeah, well, again, if you didn't know that the weather was so bad, you'd go, what the hell's going on? Actually, he's 2 for 3 for 19 yards.
Oh, he actually threw 3. Oh, wow, he's thrown some passes.
Hey, like I said, come the fourth quarter when he had the wind at his back, Jones was going to throw the ball.
He's still only thrown 3 passes.
He's 2 for 3. He's 2 for 3 for 19 yards. So, again, if you didn't watch the game and you see the weather, you'd go, what the hell's going on here?
It's still insane to actually think of any quarterback throwing 3 passes in the modern era.
Yeah. Well, here comes Josh Allen down the field. They're on the 14-yard line. It's 2.5 minutes to go.
They already screwed it up once before, so let's see what happens now. But
it's been a really good game. It's been a lot of fun to watch. But again, it kind of ruins it with the weather because it changes the whole. Yeah. If you wanted these 2 teams to go against each other to see who was the better team, this kind of puts a little bit of a question mark in your mind as to actually who is the better team. But this is a typical Belichick year of coaching. You know, maybe coach of the year, which he's only gotten 1 other one, I think. Because other than 2007, where, you know, it was all offense for the Patriots, it's always been about defense for the Patriots. It's always been about having a running game. Even with Tom Brady, they always had a good running game. They always had a way to go that way if they had to. Their defense, just like as Anthony was saying, get better. As the year goes along, they get better and better. They get more and more complex. They get more, you know, listening to Peyton and Eli talking on the Monday night thing, he said, Peyton said, I hated playing against them because every week you had to practice every play against 3 different fronts. And he said, I was exhausted by the end of the week just practicing because they throw everything at you all the time. And you on the sideline now, standing with his defense, coaching the defense, not even watching what's going on in the offense. So they are a real team at this point. You know, when they made the move on from Cam Newton, I think he's the only coach I also trust with the eye test of quarterbacks. He knows if a guy's going to be good right away. He knows who he can coach. He knows who has some skills. They moved on from Cam Newton. Everybody's like, oh, you moved on from him late. What are they going to do? You're going to go with a rookie. Yeah, no problem. The kid's good. Kid knows what he's doing. And Belichick and Saban are good friends. So they came through that whole thing. He gets all the information. He let a Garoppolo go. He lets guys leave. He let Tommy Flynn go. All these guys that good quarterbacks that he realizes who really is the guy who can play. And I think he wants this even more than let's see if Tom Brady can win without Belichick. I think this is more impressive that you get a team like this that has nothing. He's got no superstars on this team at all. He's got no wide receivers. He's got no running backs that he started with. He's got a whole new offensive line. It's the defense that plays well. He brought back Hightower. You got all these guys who can play in his system. His system works. His is the only system that doesn't matter about the guys' names on the back. His system works. Do your job, and this is what you get. You get a very successful team. Can't Rabbi, you want to?
Joe, it's funny. Like we kind of talked about this a little bit on the draft show, and I said that I thought of everybody was talking about, Justin Fields, where he was getting drafted, Zach Wilson going number 2, the kid in San Francisco, and everybody's talking about these guys, and Mac Jones falls all the way to the Patriots, and everybody was going, ooh, he fell so far. He landed in the best situation of all the rookie quarterbacks. I said so on the draft show. I said so on our kickoff show that Mac Jones was going to ultimately prove everybody wrong for letting him fall that far. He fell into the right situation, and he is showing that everything that made him a good quarterback at Alabama translates into the NFL, especially, as you said, the way Belichick runs that scheme. He's the right guy for that scheme. He makes the throws that need to be made. Nothing has been too big for him this year, and he has done a really good job. And, at the end of it, look where we are, Joe. We're coming down the stretch, and once again, New England Patriots are in the number 1 slot in the AFC.
There's that same example again of what we were talking about before. Josh McDaniel being one of the worst head coaches in history. And always comes back and always does a great job and has that scheme down and can call the plays and does it without Belichick. He basically runs the offense on the team. Everybody does what they're supposed to do. Everybody knows that you're supposed to do your job in New England. Otherwise, you're not going to have one. And that's what it is. I mean, even Matt Patricia coach and hasn't been rehired anywhere. So you see these guys that worked within that system, but then you see the successful guys that come out of it. And again, stay in your lane. Be an offensive coordinator for the rest of your life. Win more championships in New England. Don't worry about being a head coach. You got paid once from Denver.
McDaniels didn't give up. Gave up.
You got paid once from Denver. Congratulations. I hope you did something with that. I hope you invested that money. You're getting paid well in New England.
He did. That's why he didn't want to go to Indianapolis 4 years ago.
Right.
So yeah, one thing I want to say though is 2 things actually. Number one, beating Buffalo at their own game because Buffalo practices and plays in this weather and you don't play in this weather is just as impressive as playing them at a neutral site and beating them in my book. And number 2, if you look at this team, they started 2-4, but their losses, very close loss to Tampa Bay, very close loss to Dallas. They lost in overtime in a game where Mac threw a terrible interception and then literally the next play hit a 75-yard bomb down the field and saw a matchup with Stephon Diggs' brother Trayvon Diggs and said, you know what? I'm going to throw at him because I think he's going to try to make a play. And he did. So there's a lot of comparisons to the 0-1 Patriots because of the fact that Brady was only a second-year starter. They knew he was the guy to lead them. They didn't think he could have the stats because Belichick had his system, and this is exactly what the Pats are doing now. And they're about to go to 9-4. So, Joe, it's 8 o'clock at your area. I know you want to have dinner. Again, I'm still jealous of the West Coast now every time I have you on. But thank you, Joe, for keeping us company here on this portion of this week's show.
My pleasure, as always, guys.
Good to see you, Joe.
Talk to you soon. I'll be on the East Coast from Wednesday to Monday, so feel free to text in real time. You'll know what time it actually is. And
I'll actually be able to talk about it at that exact time. So
enjoy the Army Navy game, Joe.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
We'll talk soon, my friend. Good to see you.
That's Joe Tufaro, writer and a man who loves criticizing referees with me on text chains on a regular basis. Let's move on. Yesterday, the CFP Final Four was announced, and the Final Four was so easy to pick for the committee that it was like those take-home tests where you can do anything to get your 100, cheat off anybody you want, the teacher's not going to see you. So we have SEC champion Alabama at number 1, the suddenly resurgent program Michigan at number 2, the former SEC juggernaut in the world until they realize where they really place, Georgia at number 3, and the group of 5 pioneers from the American planting their flag into the college football playoff, Cincinnati at number 4. We're still over 3 weeks away from New Year's Eve in these semifinals, but let's take a look now at some of these teams that are in there, starting with Anthony and the Cats.
Yeah, you know what, for Cincinnati, you know, them getting into the college football playoff is, I would say, a victory for the group of 5 conferences. You think about Boise State, you think about UCF, you think about those teams that went through the regular season, they went unbeaten, they win their conference, you think they fit all the criteria, and they're not even considered for playing for the national championship. In the case of UCF, they couldn't get no higher than 6 in the college football poll rankings. So for years, we thought that a group of 5 was not going to be able to get in, but you look what happened on Saturday, and Cincinnati taking care of his business against Houston at home in the American Conference Championship and finishing off the undefeated season on top of that big win in Notre Dame in South Bend early this season. You think about what happened with Oklahoma State coming up 1 yard short, and then Michigan taking care of business, and then Alabama knocked off Georgia. And it seemed like it got to a point where the committee could not even come up with an excuse this time around to deny Cincinnati this time around. I mean, it was like they were the team that was going to get in, and like I said, it's a step in the right direction as far as the inclusion that was supposed to have been with this college football playoff system was created several years back. However, their reward is the Alabama Crimson Tide, who seem like they have figured everything out against supposedly the best defense in the land and literally tore them to shreds in the SEC championship game. There's a couple of keys I'm looking at. Desmond Riddler, the quarterback for Cincinnati, AAC Offensive Player of the Year the last 2 seasons, Bearcats all-time leader in passing touchdowns, and the AAC leader in total yards touchdowns responsibly, threw for 3 touchdowns, 11 of 17 passing against Houston in that title game. He's going to have to really pick it up a notch. 42-5 as a starter throughout his collegiate career. So you know he comes with a winning pedigree. He can win, but sorry about that. I got interrupted. I was looking at the last play with New England and Buffalo. But you also look at another key. It's going to be Cincinnati's defense against Alabama's offense. They're going to be down 1 key receiver. That's pretty and that's going in, talking about Alabama. But Cincinnati plays a 3-3-5 defense that the Crimson Tide offense doesn't see often, which could be to their advantage. Also, they have two pretty good defensive backs who can lock down is on one side. And then you look at Kobe Bryant with a C, who is on the other end. He's a finalist for the Jim Thorpe Award. So it's going to be, so as much as Alabama is a 13.5-point favorite, Cincinnati has more than a puncher's chance as far as pulling the upset, because they have a quarterback who is poised, who can play under pressure, but they have a defense that can mix it up. And we just talked about with Joseph about the Giants defense being able to interchange and play according to the opponent, and the Bearcats defense do that as well. And they just happen to have an even better secondary than with the Giants. a National Football League team tries out every Sunday. So Alabama missing a key wideout, a key weapon in their offense. Maybe that could come back to bite them come New Year's Eve in the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, it could very well be. But it's interesting. Since he had the resume win that was needed, that's why they got into the college football playoff. That resume win versus Notre Dame. We know the college football playoff can't take that head-to-head and say, hey, we're going to put Notre Dame over Cincinnati because that was a long time ago. Notre Dame's in it. No, they can't take that. They didn't do it with Oregon over Ohio State until Oregon lost their last two. They weren't going to do it with Cincinnati. I'm very excited to see Desmond Ridder in this college football playoff. And as much as I love Notre Dame and their story with Freeman, I didn't want to say Notre Dame in another Final Four, and now we don't have to say it. Jay, let's talk about the Michigan Wolverines, who in the span of 2 weeks have really remodeled their program. I mean, they've done it all season, but in the last 2 weeks, the public perception of this program has done a complete 180.
Yeah, and by the way, congratulations again, Jay. I know I texted you that on Saturday, but I could see it on the show.
Appreciated it. I got to tell you, I'm not surprised that once all the conference title games shook out over the weekend, that Michigan is the 2 seed. They came in as the 2 seed, and they will go into this as the 2 seed. I didn't see a scenario where the Wolverines would move up to the 1 seed, even with their convincing 42-3 win over Iowa in the Big Ten title game. Had Georgia won, the rankings prior to the conference title game would have remained the same, and Alabama winning was always going to have the SEC teams flip because there was no way the committee was going to have an SEC title game rematch in the national semifinals. They would be fine with it in the finals, but not in the semis. Michigan may not have the most talent of either of the SEC teams, but they are, as committee chair Gary Barta has been saying for weeks now, a complete and balanced team. They know who they are, and they play to their strengths. They have a sledgehammer of a downhill running game led by Hassan Haskins, who set the Michigan single-season record for rushing touchdowns with 20. They have an offensive line led by senior center Andrew Vistardis that dominates the line of scrimmage. They have a quarterback in Cade McNamara that plays within himself and within the confines of the offense, though he will need to make more plays in the passing game against Georgia. They have playmakers like running backs Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum, wide receivers Cornelius Johnson, Roman Wilson, and tight end Eric All that can break open a game with a big play. They had 2 of them against Iowa. And they have a defense led by bookend pass rushers Aiden Hutchinson, who will go to New York as a Heisman finalist. He had 13 sacks.
I'm so happy to see.
Yes.
After all of that, he's the guy who ends up going to the Heisman. Yep. He's going to be the first guy to do it, to be top 3 in 9 years. So impressive.
Yep. He had 13 sacks this season. It's a Michigan single season record. Blew away one of the previous records set by his dad of 11 20 years ago. And David Ajabu, who has 11 sacks. Those guys have wreaked havoc on Big Ten offenses all season. And, Daxton Hill, one of the better defensive backs in the nation, who probably doesn't get enough press. He deserves a little bit more recognition. The Wolverines may not be as talented on paper as the Bulldogs, who they'll face in the semifinals, but they weren't as talented on paper as the Buckeyes, and we all know how that worked out. It's why my BFF and fellow Buckeye hater Nisa Petroli always says, we don't play the games on paper. After collapsing against Michigan State, the Wolverines won 5 in a row to close the season and won those games, including the ones over Ohio State. I never expected Michigan to get this far. As I told you, Rabbi, I hoped for a good season, maybe 10 wins. Ohio State. That would have been enough. Beating the Buckeyes and winning the Big Ten title to make the CFP, well, that's more than most Wolverine fans could have ever hoped for. So what happens from this point is gravy. Even if Georgia knocks Michigan out on New Year's Eve, this will be the most successful season in Jim Harbaugh's time as head coach. And by the way, guys, Michigan wore a patch honoring the students who died in the Oxford High School shooting. The number 42 was at the top of that patch in honor of football player Tate Meyer. Hutchinson was the one who suggested the patch. And when Edwards scored with a 1:25 left in the game, it gave the Wolverines 42 points. As Hutchinson said afterwards, when somebody, made that, made that note to him. God works in mysterious ways. Not saying the big deity upstairs is a Michigan fan, but you never know. It's been that kind of a season in Ann Arbor. And guys, don't count out the Wolverines.
I think it's a crime that Georgia is 7-point favorite versus Michigan. You keep counting out the Michigan Wolverines. You keep counting out the Michigan Wolverines, a team that has absolutely not a thing to lose, who is picked fourth in their own division this year, and you see what happens. Okay, speaking of, the team that's going to play Michigan is Georgia, and they were very confident going into Saturday. Why wouldn't they be? They had a defense that was letting up less than 7 points a game, had a defense that many people thought could easily take them to a national title. Hell, they had a team so good, they made Nick Saban an underdog for the first time in 92 games.
Yep.
How did that work out for them? Not too well. They lost 42-24, a game that was exactly the same score as they lost to them a year ago by. Alabama looked completely dominant. Bryce Young basically did his Heisman speech on the field while throwing touchdowns and basically could have done the Charles Woodson Heisman pose after he ran for a 40-yard touchdown late in that first half. Alabama dissected them in every single way offensively because they had the stars, and this was without John Mechie, and he will be, as mentioned, out for the entire CFP, but they have Houston on the other side. They have such a bounty of talent. That's because every year they get the best recruits. They get the 5-star recruits to come to Alabama. That's why Nick Saban has only lost one game ever to a former assistant. Now, the question is, can Georgia bounce back? I know Georgia knows that they haven't beaten Alabama, and that's still on the horizon. Hell, Cincy could even beat Alabama, and it won't be a title rematch for the national title game if Georgia wins. It could be a Peach Bowl rematch from last year, but Georgia has to clear that mental hurdle and get ready for Michigan. We know this Georgia team is strong, but also, do we know anything about Stetson Bennett? We saw him in a close game last week, and he did okay, but then he threw a pick 6 late in that game to kind of quell all momentum against Alabama. This Michigan defense is better than Alabama's defense. I don't think that's saying too much. This team, the team that Georgia is playing right now, Michigan, is about as complete of a team, is the most complete team in the Final Four. They're not the best offense, they're not the best defense, but their offensive defense has played so well together that it's going to be a challenge for Georgia. The question is, can Georgia bounce back from the shellacking offensively that Alabama gave them? And can they muster up enough offense? And it's going to be Stetson Bennett, because as much as JT Daniels has done a good job this year in relief, you're not putting someone from out of the cold who's been stop and start in that offense this year in a national title game, unless it's a Jalen Hurts to a Tagovailoa situation from 2018. That's probably not going to happen. So
no,
it's up to Bennett to really do what they can do and let's see if Georgia can win a 16-13 game against Michigan, or if Georgia can win a 41-34 game against Michigan. I think they would rather have the latter, but again, it's about balance in this Final Four.
Bennett should be the choice. The one advantage that he actually gives them over JT Daniels is the fact that Stetson is a more mobile quarterback, and if there's any type of quarterback Michigan has struggled with this year, it is mobile quarterbacks. Those quarterbacks, at least earlier in the season, gave McDonald and his defense some trouble. Now, having almost a month to game plan for somebody like that, McDonald may come up with something. He has shown an ability to adapt to who he's playing in the scheme as the season's worn on. And to me, that's that NFL experience of his coming into play. But as you said, Rabbi, write off Michigan at your own peril in this game.
Yeah. And the only thing I would say that Georgia needs to do is really prepare a good dose of Zamir White and James Cook, because the way we saw it, the team with the best running back in Michigan to play this year, Kenneth Walker III, basically wrote his Heisman speech while playing Michigan. back a couple of months ago at East Lansing, and that's the reason Michigan lost their one and only game this season. All right.
And I tell you this, it's going to come down to the trenches, and Michigan's offensive line may be the best that Georgia's defensive front will face all year. And that's saying something considering they played Alabama. So,
yeah, well, Alabama's not the greatest running team that they were in previous years.
Nope.
And there's no running back in the world who's hotter than him. All right. College football, where all the old-time folks cry when players leave to go to other schools, but have no problem when coaches go elsewhere for greener pastures. Last week was insane.
Oh my God.
Schools so big, they're only known by 3 letters, get big time names to lead their institutions. And I wrote this before the official announcement of Brent Venables going to Oklahoma after being Clemson's defensive coordinator for so many years, going home, and Mario Cristobal of Oregon going over to Miami. Yes, I love that hire, and I think that'll help Oregon in the transition, Oklahoma in their transition to the SEC. But let's talk about the 2 big names. But Notre Dame had to hire a head coach because of all of those big names, and Anthony will talk about the.
Yeah, and with Brian Kelly's departure and Notre Dame needing to fill that position, they decided to stay in-house. And this is something that the players and obviously the alumni got a lot of support. Marcus Freeman, the defensive coordinator, steps in, has new head coach. His first game officially would be they're going to a bowl game this year, obviously.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that's going to be his first game.
That will be his first game. Yeah.
Yeah, but you look at his addition as a defensive coordinator since he's joined the school. The Fighting Irish have really improved on that end. They held their Final Four opponents of the season to a combined 23 points, and they're putting the finishing touches on their first top 5 class since 2013. Obviously, 2012, 2013, they played for the national championship game against Alabama. We go back that far. So that's the first time they've had a top 5 class since that season. But he's been known, obviously he's popular with the players. He is known for his aggressive recruiting. And that is one of the things that Coach Kenny, he's been very aggressive since he joined Notre Dame. He's already locked up some key recruits for 2022 or 2023. He's been great with motivating some of the talent that's already on the team. You look at J.D. Beltran, who led the team in tackles with 92. No other player had 50 on that team. So what he has done is, and obviously, you look at his background. He's married, he's a father of 6, and he really takes motivating and being kind of a leadership father figures very seriously. And I think that's really something that Notre Dame is going to be happy with promoting him in-house and being the new head coach. Also, they retain your offensive coordinator as well. So the continuity for Notre Dame, especially coming off this season when they've been one of the best successful seasons in a while and kind of building up the last few years, to keep that continuity, I think, in place is very important. Especially we got a new class coming in. So this is a great hire by Notre Dame. It's been praised in the national media and obviously in the local media. I do read the South Bend newspapers once in a while. I get them it's so funny because I still get.
I was going to say, can you get the Chronicle of the newspapers in any way,
yes,
shape, or form?
I still get college. I still get college newspapers and the Cleveland Observer.
How many colleges did you get papers for when you were doing your recruiting?
And look, my journalism days from Hofstra still run off over even at the age of 38. So what can I say? But it's a great hire for Notre Dame. Moving forward, it's not much more else I can say about it.
I could say this right now, and Jay, I'm going to criticize it for both of the hires of the teams we follow in a second. Notre Dame knows what they are, and that's the most important thing. They didn't go out and try to go for an Urban Meyer. They didn't I think Luke Fickell could have been a good hire too. but they didn't wait until bowl season was over to go for Luke Fickell and kind of drag Marcus Freeman. They knew what the players wanted. They knew who was respected in the organization, and they liked what Brian Kelly had done. They may not like Brian Kelly as a person too much now, but they liked what Brian Kelly had done. And that's why Freeman is 35 and at Notre Dame, which is insane how young the man is compared to all of us old fogies. Speaking of people who are tremendously younger than us, well, not for us too, but pretty much right around our age, let's talk about Lincoln Riley going to USC.
Yeah, to say that this came out of nowhere is the understatement of the college football season. Anyone who tells you they saw this coming is full of it. To say that this instantly makes USC relevant, again, is understating it. No disrespect to the juggernaut that Mario Cristobal built at Oregon, which he will be leaving as he takes his coaching talents to South Beach, which was announced earlier today. But the Pac-12 specifically and college football in general is better when USC is relevant. USC struggled mightily in its attempts to keep homegrown talent at home as Oregon, Ohio State, Alabama, and even Oklahoma under Riley poached many a 4-star and 5-star talent from such high school powerhouses as Mater Dei and others that used to be automatic pipelines to USC. Mater Dei in particular was well known for sending elite quarterbacks. Matt Leinart, Matt Barkley come to mind to USC, but of late those quarterbacks in the state. JT Daniels, Bryce Young are two of the most recent, though Daniels did actually spend a season with the Trojans. Ohio State CJ Stroud and Ole Miss's Matt Corral are other top-flight California high school quarterbacks who USC could not keep from going east. Riley's resume for developing Heisman-level quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray won. Jalen Hurts was runner-up in his only season in Norman, should help keep, the next round of high school quarterbacks in state. We've already seen it happen. 5-star 2023 quarterback Malachi Nelson from Los Alamitos, he's the number 2 quarterback in that class behind Arch Manning, committed to Oklahoma because he wanted to play for Riley. All it took was a phone call from Riley the night he was hired to get Nelson to change his commitment from Oklahoma to USC. Not long after that, Raleek Brown, the number 2 running back in the class of 2022, another 5-star player, changed his commitment from Oklahoma to USC. And while Nelson plays his senior season next year, Riley gets to develop Jackson Dart, who showed a lot of potential this season, splitting time at quarterback with Keita. It'll be interesting to see if Slovis sticks around with Riley as the head coach. Riley can say that leaving Norman for Los Angeles is all about this being the right time for him and his family to try something new and has nothing to do with going from being the big fish in the Big 12 pond to being just another fish in the SEC pond. And that may be true, but there is no doubt that he can very easily get USC back to being the big fish in the Pac-12 pond. Riley won't have the same type of immediate success at USC as he did at Oklahoma. Bob Stoops left the cupboard pretty full in Norman when he left. Not only does the cupboard need refilling at USC, the offense and defensive lines are in desperate need of top-level talent. The defense needs more speed and athleticism. The offense needs more playmaking and explosiveness. But the culture needs a makeover as well. The lack of accountability that permeated the players, coaches, staff, etc. during Clay Helton's tenure was flat out awful. Riley recognized this, saying, quote, "We plan on building the best roster in the country, and within that locker room, the best culture in the country. It's not about individual players here. It's not going to be. We're not going to let it be," end quote. So he understands what will be at the top of his to-do list after he builds out his staff. Alex Grinch and Dennis Simmons came with him from Oklahoma immediately and will be the Trojans' new defensive coordinator and receivers coach, respectively. But the rest of the coaching staff needs to be put together. Roy Manning, who is currently the defensive backs coach, and Bill Bedenbaugh, who is one of the best offensive line coaches in college football, are rumored to be the next OU assistants to follow Riley to USC. And if there's any way Dante Williams can be retained, Riley should find a way. The players love him, and he's one hell of a recruiter. As I said at the top, the Pac-12 and specifically in college football in general is better when USC is relevant. Getting Lincoln Riley is a huge first step in getting the Trojans back to a level of relevancy that USC hasn't had since Pete Carroll left Westwood for the Pacific Northwest.
I'm very interested to see how the Pac-12 will fit on the national radar because of this move. I think if USC, I think the first step for USC is just to win the Pac-12. next year. I don't know if they could be a top 4 college football playoff team. Maybe they can, but I think for USC, I think they need to just get back to what a team like Utah was this year. Getting to what, maybe getting some early season picks, but coming back and looking like one of the best teams in the country, and then worry about where they fit in the national scheme of things, especially when we have the SEC merge in 2023. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Kelly moved from Notre Dame to LSU, and I don't know what to think about it. I think it's great for LSU to get a guy who's basically been in the top 4 conversation at Notre Dame the last 5-6 years and has got to a national title, got to 2 college football playoffs, and got to 1 BCS championship game going undefeated before getting stomped by Alabama in that game. Brian Kelly had built a culture in Notre Dame. It's been a good culture in Notre Dame. However, the way he left and the way everything came is a sour taste almost everyone's mouth in Notre Dame.
Yeah.
If you thought the move from Lincoln Riley was what the fuck, the move the next day from Chip Kelly was what the fuck. There was a lot of rumors that Lincoln Riley was going to go to LSU, but that kind of got squashed. And then this happened the next day. The rumors were, and pretty much been confirmed, that he had a 4-minute meeting the next day with his players telling him why he's leaving. And to me, I wouldn't even wake up in that situation. I would just say, I will wait for Marcus Freeman or anybody else to come as my new head coach, because at that moment, Brian Kelly was dead. Brian Kelly will do. Ed Orgeron's problem in LSU was not recruiting. Recruiting was his strong suit. I think Brian Kelly will be a good coach. I think Brian Kelly, with the right scheme and the right fitting, could be a 9 to 10 win coach every single year. I just don't know who the LSU coach is going to be to get them over the hump, and that hump is Alabama. But again, LSU is not there. There's not going to be many Joe Burrows walking through the door. And the fact that Notre Dame promoted from within, Marcus Freeman did not come to LSU as defensive coordinator. They weren't able to hire Notre Dame's offensive coordinator to come over there. The one thing that threw from the sky of angels, and I wish this had happened a week earlier, is the Panthers just got rid of Joe Brady as offensive coordinator. That was the quarterback coach there for many years, including 2019. That could be the right fit as offensive coordinator. I could at least save Brian Kelly from not having to have not a ragtag group of coordinators, but a group of coordinators who will be a yes sir to Kelly as coach. Very interested to see how this works out in LSU. Recruiting for South Bend is not recruiting in the SEC. Right? Recruiting in the SEC is a different kind of level. I think we all know that. The SEC is sending everybody from their conference to a bowl game except for one team. So when you're in the SEC, you're expected to be a contender almost every single year as long as you have the ability. And that's something I think Brian Kelly is going to be able to do. I just don't know how he's going to do it yet. And by the way, take the Southern accent all you want. That doesn't make you warm up to me or anybody else. Look at the video of him trying to use a Southern accent and cringe. The whole world is cringing, and I am cringing too. Don't do that. Just don't.
No, I agree with you, Rabbi. Here, you mentioned Joe Brady, and it's going to be bandied about, until Brady lands somewhere, and he will land somewhere. Whether it's in the
he
NFL,
might even go to Oregon as head coach at this rate. Who knows?
Who knows? But here's the one thing, though. I mean, in terms of him going back to LSU,
I'll be right back, guys.
He has a different offensive philosophy than Chip Kelly does. So unless he's willing to change how he's, change his philosophy, I don't know if he actually is the right fit as Kelly's offensive coordinator. It'll be interesting to see if any of the current Notre Dame assistants follow Kelly down to LSU. The guy is not media friendly, Anthony. So I don't know if he hasn't been media friendly at Cincinnati. He wasn't media friendly at Notre Dame. He definitely wasn't media friendly in the NFL. I don't know if that's going to change. He's never going to win the personality award that, in terms of the SEC coaches, the rest of the lot of whom seem to have a lot more personality. But if they win titles, if he wins them titles down in Baton Rouge, I don't think they'll care if he says anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, look, the way he hires you to be Mr. Personality, losses. And if you're racking up more W's than L's, they don't care. I mean, look, we just watched Monday Night Football, and we just watched Bill Belichick, who's never going to be Mr. Charisma ever. And again, he's winning with a system, a young quarterback, and a good defense, and we've been seeing that for almost 2 decades. So they don't pay you for smiles and winks. I mean, they pay you for wins and
losses, and consistently being in the top 10 or top 5 in recruiting classes. And that's the thing. I mean, we all know Notre Dame is a national school, and because it's an independent, there's not as much pressure on them. They don't play the same, even though they're a national team, they don't play the same type of schedule. Even the contractually obligated 5 games or whatever they have against the ACC every year, it's not the same scenario. It's not as much as Kelly's going to be dealing with in the SEC every single week, every single year. He's literally going to have to be on 24/7, 365, and in the SEC, being the head coach of a team like LSU in that conference is a 24/7, 365.
Oh yeah.
To be fair, though,
and you gotta understand it. Just 2 years ago, they were national champions. So it's not like he's coming into a program that has been suffering for a long time. This is a team that was just 2 years removed for being on top of the college football chain. So he's walking into a buzzsaw right now.
With expectations up here.
Yeah, he has to also recruit because there's a difference between the 2019 national champion. Yeah, I know we did, but we don't. There's a difference between having Burrow, Jamar Chase, and what they had in that pipeline for so many years especially of the Orgeron era, and going back a little bit to Les Miles and what they have now. But it'd be very interesting to see what Kelly does. I know he has a proven track record, but it's a different ballgame. Although being the head football coach at Notre Dame is still also a 24-hour job because you have a network that you're putting your games on. It's an institution. So it's a
brand. It's a brand.
That's the thing. You guys, you talk about brands, and it just kind of dawned on me right now as you dropped that word, how many of the programs that changed head coaches and made big splashes changing head coaches have a very specific brand within the framework of college football. USC, Notre Dame, LSU, Miami now, with Cristobal coming home, if you will, Oklahoma. It's rare to see so many brand name college football programs change at the top spot in a single year, in a single decade, let alone a single week, pretty much.
And it literally trended because of 2 spots of USC, LSU, and Miami that literally set the path. We still have Oregon.
I tell you,
pipeline.
Yeah, I will be interested. Oregon is a notch below that, but it'll be interesting to see who steps in to replace Cristobal, because whoever it is going to come in with some expectations as well to try and keep that brand. And they have become a brand. Under Cristobal, they supplanted USC basically as the face of the Pac-12 in terms of programs. So it'll be interesting to see who they bring in, because there are now expectations in Eugene, that, we lose Cristobal, we got to replace, we can't replace him with, somebody we don't know. We have to get a brand name to replace a guy who made himself into a brand name. So it'll be interesting to see how that coaching search plays out. Talk a little baseball, Rabbi? What do you say?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, also just look at how Florida State, Willie Taggart moved from Oregon to Florida State, and he only lasted 2 years. So Oregon is seeming like a stepping stone. Yes.
Hey, and speaking of Florida, give the Gators credit. Napier's that's a real solid choice to replace Mullen as head coach.
It's a very interesting choice, because they actually kept it kind of quiet and went the route that a lot of teams had, going from a low level group of 5 to a big.
Hey, just remember, he has plenty of SEC experience.
Oh no, he absolutely does. So, I'm just saying, that's kind of the traditional way. All right, baseball. Finally, baseball is locked out. what else can I say? For the first time since 1994, 1995, we have a work stoppage. Thursday, December 2nd might be the first day of what could be a long, long, long process. And don't say, oh, baseball isn't going on right now. Who cares? It's a deal, because this is the tea leaves have been on the wall for a long time. At least that seems to be the prevailing thought that this is going to be a long, long process. Anthony, why?
One word: money. It's all about the money, baby. We all know that.
All about the Benjamin.
Look, the players, obviously, when you look at the player side of things, they want to kind of overhaul a luxury tax system, salary arbitration. They want a little piece more of that. Then you think about some of the players that, as far as payouts, when they become free agents and they'll year 6, age 30 season. Those are some of the things. And they also, and then we look at the owner side of it. They proposed $1 billion threshold rather than going through salary arbitration each offseason for certain players. You talk about the expansion of trying to expand the postseason. The union proposed 12 teams. The league wants 14. They, talking about the TV money. Fox, ESPN, and Turner. Their new TV deals kick in at the start of next season, where they're going to be paying more money moving forward for the television rights. And obviously, expanding playoffs will mean ESPN would chip in more money on their end of the deal. So it's a lot of money at stake as far as equal share of the pie and who feels like they deserve that equal share. But you look at it like this, I know a lot of people remember the 1994 draft that wiped out the second half of that season and kind of spilled over into the 1995 season. I think back to 1990 and remembering how that work stoppage played out throughout the winter. While it didn't cost Major League Baseball any games, it did kind of throw a monkey wrench in a lot of in the spring training schedule, whereas teams with a lot of free agents that are kind of out in limbo. Teams are obviously not able to do any business dealings, any transitions. There are no winter meetings going on right now, are scheduled to move forward. So it all comes down to money. It's been something that's been brewing for the last 4 or 5 years. And we really kind of started to see it rear its ugly head prior to the pandemic, towards the end of the 2019 season, and kind of heading into the spring of 2020. We started to see Rob Manfred and called the Players Union president really kind of butt heads on several occasions. And it was something that was bound to happen. The best thing I would say this, Major League Baseball, in this case, had the luxury of this happening during the offseason. Obviously, they just crowned the world champion, the Atlanta Braves. Ironically enough, that was the first team that won the World Series after the 94 right. season was ended. It was the Braves that became the world champions the next season. So
the symmetry is amazing, actually.
Yeah, it's the irony. But you think about this right now: football, basketball is going on. We got hockey. There's a lot going on. So Major Baseball is kind of on the back burner because the season just recently ended. I don't know if the champagne is dry down in Fulton County yet, but we got to see how this play out. It has the start of spring training start to creep up a little more if this become a bigger story. When you see the possibility, and obviously Jay will touch into it a little more, when you see the possibility of games being lost because of a work stoppage. And obviously it took baseball a number of years and a memorable home run chase to kind of get back in the good graces of fans. And I think the last thing Major League Baseball want to do is have to win fans back again when they've had such a hard time, particularly with the younger audience. and trying to get fans to tune in on TV on a regular basis.
Let me say this now. First of all, that champagne dried up in Fulton County at about 6 o'clock on Saturday night when they realized the Georgia Bulldogs were about to pull another Georgia Bulldog joke. Other stuff too, I would have to say, it's true. Other stuff is, first of all, I realized this when it happened. Baseball had the longest amount of time with labor peace. Football had a work stoppage technically in 2011. Basketball had a work stoppage in 2012. Hockey had a work stoppage in 2000, lost an entire season, but has actually now had the most labor peace out of anybody after having a work stoppage in 2005, 2006. And now we have baseball, who in the 3 days, Monday through Wednesday, before the lockout happened, spent $2 billion worth of contracts.
1.7.
It's more than $2 billion the full offseason with 1.7 in the 3-day period. But just look at some of the contracts that just got basically handed out over the few days. The Texas Rangers, who have been bottom feeders and the team who has been the least fiscally conservative over the last few years, handed a 10-year, $325 million contract for Corey Seager. They gave a 7-year, $175 million contract to Marcus Semien. They gave John Gray a 4-year, $56 million contract. They spent $561 million on 4 players. Anthony, the Mets are not too far behind, obviously. They spent $250 million on their players, obviously, with the gem being, as we'll talk about in the future, a 3-year, $130 million
contract. The Mets made it rain. I can tell you that much.
Dax Scherzer, $43 million a year. The Detroit Tigers spent a ton of money for Javi Baez to get him away from the Mets. They've spent $217 million so far. What are these teams doing? These teams have had no success for a decade, and they're thinking this could be the way that gets them to the future. And then with all that, all the hypocrisy, all of the we can't survive. You're about spending billions of dollars. Can you live off of the regional sports networks until the end of time? Because that's essentially what baseball now gets their big money off of. They're not a national sport anymore. They're a regional sport. Nobody outside of the Northeast cares about the Yankees 24/7 like New York does. Sorry to say. Nobody outside of Houston cares about the Astros in a positive light 24/7 like Houston does. So that's the thing. You're going to spend all of this money. Stop crying poverty when you get to these winter meetings. It's tremendous hypocrisy. And I'm not even thinking about what will happen when we don't get locked out and Carlos Correa is going to get the 10th contract worth more than $300 million. Stop it now. Jay, take us home.
Guys, y'all have made really good points, and your frustration with this is painfully evident. And I feel the same way, but I'll really start to worry about this if we're still here come February. And then you're going to hear me on this show rant and rave about millionaire players and billionaire owners and their utter to equitably split a pot of gold worth billions. But in the meantime, these are the things I think, to paraphrase the legendary Peter King. I read Rob Manfred's letter to the fans after MLB locked out the players. Now, I understand Manfred's and the owner's logic in believing that an off-season lockout is the best mechanism to protect the 2022 season. They hope that the lockout will jumpstart negotiations and get everyone to an agreement that will allow the season to start on time. But I do not believe that the quote, Players Association's vision for Major League Baseball would threaten the ability of most teams to be competitive, and that, quote, it's simply not a viable option, end quote. The owners cry foul every time the Players Association wants to increase their share of the pie. And I'm sorry, but you can't cry poverty, or the billionaire equivalent, and then hand out almost, as Rabbi said, $2 billion in contracts right before imposing a lockout. It does lend some credence to MLB PA's response to Manfred's letter about the lockout, which included the following quote, "It's not required by law or for any other reason," referencing the lockout. "It was the owner's choice, plain and simple, specifically calculated to pressure players into relinquishing rights and benefits and abandoning good faith bargaining proposals that would benefit not just the players, but the game and the industry as a whole, end quote. It's no surprise to me, guys, after all this time and all these years, that each side views the other's proposal as radical or extreme in what's being asked for. Among the things the union has asked for are a desire to raise the luxury tax thresholds and to shorten the length of time it takes players to reach free agency, as well as a plan to reduce the amount of money that flows between owners via revenue sharing. Players believe that clubs can too easily make money without having to actually invest in the on-field product, and they want to reduce revenue sharing to tighten the spigot. Manfred believes such things are, quote, bad for the sport, bad for the fans, and bad for competitive balance, end quote. The union's lead negotiator, Bruce Meyer, believes the radical or extreme things are coming from the other side. Here's the quote. The other side has proposed to completely eliminate salary arbitration, which is one of the signature accomplishments of this union, to replace it with a wage scale, to extend the period of team control, potentially for players far longer than they have the ability to control them now, to put in a new, even worse kind of luxury tax at the top, end quote. Yeah, it's typical billionaire owners versus millionaire players stuff, but it does make you wonder if there's a real credence to the Players Association, the comment rather that Players Association Executive Director Tony Clark made that the lockout was, quote, unnecessary to continue the dialogue. And from the outset, it seemed as if the league has been more interested in the appearance of bargaining than bargaining itself. Clark also said the league was not required to declare a lockout, and he's right. The other thing that, in my opinion, doesn't make the owners look good is that they refuse to allow potential rule changes like the universal DH, the 15-second pitch clock, to name two, to be part of these negotiations. They must think it will give the players more leverage, and they can't allow that, right? The owners are stuck on the old rules, which have never allowed on-field changes to be part of what they consider an economic negotiation. But considering the crossroads that the game is at, not wanting to take care of everything all at once seems like a missed opportunity. And the old, quote, the commissioner can unilaterally implement any rule changes he wants, so there's no reason to make such things part of CBA negotiations, makes it look like that once again, the owners, as Anthony said, only really care about the green that ends up in their wallet, not what happens on the green in between the white lines. Here's something to keep in mind, guys. A study by the Associated Press back in April revealed that the average salary at the major league level dropped 4.8% to 4.17 million in 2019 and 6.4% since the start of the 2017 season when it peaked at 4.45 million. Now, there are a couple of qualifiers here. The 2021 figures did not include the salaries of 3 well-paid players who were not on opening day rosters for procedural reasons. And the average likely fell slightly because of the expansion of rosters from 25 to 26 and the additions of minimum salary players in that extra slot. But if you're a player, the numbers don't lie. The salaries are not keeping in pace with the sport's revenues, which continue to rise year over year. We always seem to look at the players' salaries through the prism of the elite of the game who get those $300 million contracts. The system may work for them, but most of the rank and file isn't in that salary range, so the system doesn't work for them. Just because the players aren't suffering in comparison to you and me doesn't mean they're getting their fair share. That's all the players have ever wanted since the days of Curt Flood and Andy Messersmith. The owners didn't care about being true partners back then, and their attitude hasn't really improved since. And sadly, I don't see it changing. I just hope it doesn't end up costing us regular season games in 2022.
Does Rob Manfred even like the sport? We talked about this last week. Does Rob Manfred even like the sport?
It does make you wonder, doesn't it?
I think he does it. I think he kind of wants to try to build a game nationally and build his own little brand, but the owners want to make the money off of regional sports networks because they pay him a load of money, and that's how they make it through that and tickets. So again, I simply ask, does Rob Manfred actually like the game that he's commissioner?
Look, I know this.
I gotta say this. I mean, we talked about this in the production meeting. In comparison to the guys who preceded him in that office, you talk about Bud Selig, you talk about Peter Uberoth, you talk about Faye Vincent, you talk about, the guys who came before that. you got the impression that they did love the game. They invoked their, in the best interest of the game, powers to do what was right for the game of baseball. You don't get that impression from Manfred at all in comparison. I mean, we talk about, say what you want about Roger Goodell. The man loves the football. Adam Silver, the man carries his love of the game. It's open and obvious there for everyone to see on his sleeve. I mean, even Gary Bettman, as much as we've ragged on him throughout the years, I kind of get the feeling he likes the NHL.
He likes the game.
He likes
the game. You don't get yourself involved in the game that long to not like.
Yeah, but I agree with you, Rabbi. I do wonder, does Manfred actually like the game?
I like this.
Take us on, Anthony.
If he doesn't like the game, he better find something up again by April, okay? I have tickets to what could be Matt Soldier's first start with the Mets against that weekend. So he better find something, all right? I am not I had several games that I was going to go to during the 2020 season wiped out because of the pandemic. I am not going to have fresh tickets for my Mets wiped away because of a lockout, all right? You better, like I said, you better find some a love or crush for the game before April 4th. That's all I'm saying.
I like baseball, but I haven't been doing it.
Yeah. At the end of the day, Rabbi, the only real losers during these type of things are us, the fans. We are the ones who ultimately wind up losing.
Yeah, I like baseball, but I haven't been to a game for many years for that reason. Anyway, let's finish this up. For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait and my little guests and our guest Joe Tufaro, who did such a good job helping us with everything football. For Minshew Mania, which is alive and well, baby. For Jake from State From, the next starting quarterback for the Giants next week. For the man who did retain the title tonight, thank you. For Nick Saban and Bill Belichick, who will be the best coaches, who are playing checkers. We're playing chess while everybody is playing checkers until the day everybody dies. For the Buffalo Bills, who cost me $200 in my pool this week, thank you guys.
For Mac Jones and his 3 passing attempts.
For Mac Jones and his 2 for 3 for 19. For college football and the Cincinnati Bearcats. For Marcus Freeman. For Brian Kelly's fake Southern accent. And for, again, a commissioner that doesn't actually like the sport that he likes, I'm Steve.
And let's hail to the victors one more time, guys.
Go ahead. You want to sing it?
Hail to the victors valiant, hail to the conquering heroes, hail, hail, Michigan, the leaders and the best. Welcome back to Relevant.
By the way, only the Cincinnati and Michigan, only the 12th and 13th teams to make the CFP in 8 years. Talk about inclusivity. Okay. Yep. Anyway, you can watch us on demand, youtube.com/onthesportslines, live at facebook.com/onthesportslines and Jay.
You can follow us on Twitter at ONTH Sportslines, where you will find the link to this show and other interesting sports tidbits that we think is worth your time to check out.
This is our last news show of 2021. The next time you see us, we will be recapping the year that was 2021. Christmas is in 19 days. Go get your gifts, my friends. Yeah, we're at that point. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Everyone.